You're watching Truth Cherry. Like, comment, subscribe. Twitter Files. Part 10. Twitter silenced factual info. How Twitter rigged the CUF debate. By censoring information that was true but inconvenient to U.S. government policy. By discrediting doctors and other experts who disagreed. By suppressing ordinary users, including some sharing the CDC's own data. So far, the Twitter files have focused on evidence of Twitter's secret blacklists, how the company functioned as a kind of subsidiary of the FBI, and how execs rewrote the platform's rules to accommodate their own political desires. What we have yet to cover is the CUF. This reporting, for the free press, is one piece of that important story. The United States government pressured Twitter and other social media platforms to elevate certain content and suppress other content about the CUF. Internal files at Twitter that I viewed while on assignment for the free press showed that both the Trump and Biden administrations directly pressed Twitter executives to moderate the content according to their wishes. At the onset, according to meeting notes, the Trump admin was especially concerned about panic buying. They came looking for help from the tech companies to combat misinformation about runs on grocery stores. But there were runs on grocery stores. In this note from communications documented to Twitter, the Trump White House, specifically Michael Kroxios, led the Trump administration's calls for help from the tech companies to combat misinformation. Areas of focus included conspiracies around 5G cell towers, runs on grocery stores, and misinformation that could stoke panic buying and behaviors. It wasn't just Twitter. The meetings with the Trump White House were also attended by Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and others. In this documented communication, Twitter, alongside several other tech companies including Google, Facebook, and Microsoft, participated. Activities included a standing weekly call to share general trends and hosting a shared Microsoft Teams group. Some of the companies, not Twitter, gathered open-sourced information from researchers. Our teams fed this information to the Twitter policy enforcement teams. When the Biden admin took over, one of their first meeting requests with Twitter executives was on the CUF. The focus was on anti-vaxxer accounts, especially Berenson. In the summer of 2021, President Biden said social media companies were killing people for allowing misinformation. Berenson was suspended hours after Biden's comments and kicked off the platform the following month. Berenson sued and then settled with Twitter. In the legal process, Twitter was compelled to release certain internal communications, which showed direct White House pressure on the company to take action on Berenson. A December 2022 summary of meetings with the White House by Lauren Culbertson, Twitter's head of U.S. public policy, adds new evidence of the White House's pressure campaign and cements that it repeatedly attempted to directly influence the platform. Culbertson wrote that the Biden team was very angry that Twitter had not been more aggressive in deplatforming multiple accounts. They wanted Twitter to do more. Twitter executives did not fully capitulate to the Biden team's wishes. An extensive review of internal communications at the company revealed employees often debating moderation cases in great detail and with more care than was shown by the government toward free speech. But Twitter did suppress views, many from doctors and scientific experts, that conflicted with the official positions of the White House. As a result, legitimate findings and questions that would have expanded the public debate went missing. There were three serious problems with Twitter's process. First, much of the content moderation was conducted by bots, trained on machine learning and AI, impressive in their engineering, yet still too crude for such nuanced work. Second, contractors, in places like the Philippines, also moderated content. They were given decision trees to aid in the process, but tasking non-experts to adjudicate tweets on complex topics like myocarditis and mask efficacy data was destined for a significant error rate. Third, most importantly, the buck stopped with higher-level employees at Twitter who chose the inputs for the bots and decision trees and subjectively decided escalated cases and suspensions. As it is with all people and institutions, there was individual and collective bias. With the CUF, this bias bent heavily toward establishment dogmas. Inevitably, dissident yet legitimate content was labeled as misinformation, and the accounts of doctors and others were suspended both for tweeting opinions and demonstrably true information. Exhibit A. Dr. Martin Kulldorff, an epidemiologist at Harvard Medical School, tweeted views at odds with U.S. public health authorities and the American left, the political affiliation of nearly the entire staff at Twitter. Internal emails show an intent to action by a moderator saying Kulldorff's tweet violated the company's misinformation policy and claimed he shared false information. But Kulldorff's statement was an expert's opinion, one which also happened to be in line with policies in numerous other countries. Yet it was deemed false information by Twitter moderators merely because it differed from CDC guidelines. After Twitter took action, Kulldorff's tweet was slapped with a misleading label and all replies and likes were shut off, throttling the tweet's ability to be seen and shared by many people, the ostensible core function of the platform. In my review of internal files, I found countless instances of tweets labeled as misleading or taken down entirely, sometimes triggering account suspensions simply because they veered from CDC guidance or differed from establishment views. A tweet by @KellyKGA, a self-proclaimed public health fact-checker with 18,000 followers, was flagged as misleading and replies and likes disabled, even though it displayed the CDC's own data. In that tweet, KellyKGA writes, "What an excellent example of cherry-picking. If you narrow it down to only the specific months you specify, which include the largest COVID wave seen across the world, and you ignore all non-disease deaths, and you ignore cancer, heart disease, SIDS, then the COVID is leading." Although the jab wasn't mentioned in this tweet, it was labeled as misleading with a message about the jab. Internal records showed that a bot had flagged the tweet, and that it received many tattles, what the system amusingly called reports from users. That triggered a manual review by a human, who, despite the tweet showing actual CDC data, nevertheless, labeled it as misleading. Tellingly, the tweet by KellyKGA that was labeled misleading was a reply to a tweet that contained actual misinformation. COVID has never been the leading cause of death from disease in children. Yet that tweet remains on the platform, and without a misleading label. In this tweet, a user named Gregory Travis says, "As do I. Here's some data. Since December of 2021, COVID has been the leading cause of death from disease in children." And yet, the tweet that was labeled as misleading was the one actually posting actual data from the CDC refuting the original tweet from Gregory Travis. Whether by humans or algorithms, content that was contrarian but true was still subject to getting flagged or suppressed. This tweet was labeled misleading, even though the owner of this account, a physician, was referring to the results of a published study. Here is an example of that tweet that was labeled misleading. Andrew Bostom, a Rhode Island physician, was permanently suspended from Twitter after receiving multiple strikes for misinformation. One of his strikes was for a tweet referring to the results from a peer-reviewed study on the jab. A review of Twitter log files revealed that an internal audit, conducted after Bostom's attorney contacted Twitter, found that only one of Bostom's 5 violations were valid. The one Bostom tweet found to still be in violation cited data that was legitimate but inconvenient to the public health establishment's narrative about the risks of flu versus the COVID in children. Here's that tweet. That this tweet was not only flagged by a bot, but its violation manually affirmed by a staff member is telling of both the algorithmic and human bias at play. Bostom's account was suspended for months and was finally restored on Christmas Day. Another example of human bias run amok was the reaction to this tweet by 45. Many of his tweets led to extensive internal debates, and this one was no different. In a surreal exchange, Jim Baker, at the time Twitter's deputy general counsel, asks why telling people to not be afraid wasn't a violation of Twitter's misinformation policy. Yoel Roth, Twitter's former head of trust and safety, had to explain that optimism wasn't misinformation. In the email exchange, Jim Baker asks, Yoel and Stacia, why isn't this POTUS tweet a violation of our policy, especially the don't be afraid statement? Thanks, Jim. Roth answers, hey Jim, adding you to the main thread on the subject. In short, this tweet is a broad, optimistic statement. It doesn't incite people to do something harmful, nor does it recommend against taking precautions of following mask directives or other guidelines. It doesn't fall within the published scope of our policies. Curious whether you have a different read on it, though. Remember Kelly KGA with the CDC data tweet? Twitter's response to her is clarifying, we will prioritize review and labeling of content that could lead to increased exposure or transmission. In that response, Twitter writes, hello at Kelly KGA. Our teams are using and improving on internal systems to proactively monitor content related to the CUF. These systems help ensure we're not amplifying tweets with these warnings or labels and detecting the high visibility content quickly. Additionally, we'll continue to rely on trusted partners to identify content that is likely to result in offline harm. Given the dynamic situation, we will prioritize review and labeling of content that could lead to increased exposure or transmission. We'll learn a lot as we use these new labels and are open to adjusting as we explore labeling different types of misleading information. This process is ongoing and we'll work to make sure these and other labels and warnings show up across Twitter. Embedded tweets and tweets viewed by people not logged into Twitter may still appear without a label. Serving the public conversation remains our overarching mission, and we'll keep working to build tools and offer context so that people can find credible and authentic information on Twitter. We appreciate you letting us know, and we'll share this with the team as we look ahead to potential updates and changes. Thanks, Twitter support. Twitter made a decision, via the political leanings of senior staff and government pressure, that the public health authorities' approach to the problem, prioritizing mitigation over other concerns was, quote, the science, unquote. Information that challenged that view, such as showing harms of jabs, or that could be perceived as downplaying the risks of the CUF, especially to children, was subject to moderation and even suppression. No matter whether such views were correct or adopted abroad. What might this challenge and its aftermath have looked like if there had been a more open debate on Twitter and other social media platforms? Not to mention the mainstream press, about the origins, lockdowns, about the true risks in kids, and much more. Thanks to at Schellenberger MD, at L. Woodhouse, at L. H. Fong and the team at the FP for their help reporting this story. An expanded version of this thread is available now at the Free Press. You've been watching Truth Cherry. Thank you. Please subscribe.